I know a lot of people who own XRP who are excited about the next bull run, but almost no one is talking about the threat that could steal your gains before you can enjoy them. Now, I'm going to tell you something that could be the most important thing I've ever said on this show. I thought I was safe. I believed that if I kept my XRP out of exchanges, kept my keys safe, and waited for the moon, no one could get to me. After that, I found something that really hit me hard. There is one story, one expert, and one warning. And everything I thought I knew about the safety of crypto turned out to be wrong. I'm drinking my morning tea and reading the crypto news as I always do when I see a story that really stands out to me. It says that this is going to be very important for everyone who owns XRP to understand. You better believe I clicked right away. I felt sick to my stomach as soon as I started reading because the warning wasn't about hacks, rules, or trades. It wasn't about that. It was about something much worse. Something that most people who own XRP never think about. A legal trap that is easy to miss. A weakness that is so easy to miss that it could cost you your whole bag, even though you didn't do anything wrong. Jake Claver, a crypto wealth advisor, was the one who sounds the warning. And what he said was very harsh. Most of us hold our XRP in our names, wallets, and private keys. If you do the same, you could be totally exposed in ways you never thought possible. It's not from hackers, but from claims, courts, and other legal issues that have nothing to do with crypto, but can quickly drain your funds. I knew the threat wasn't just a thought after he laid it out. It was true. All of us need to pay attention to this. Now, a quick word. Check out the XRP Millionaire Blueprint to learn how the richest crypto owners plan, think, and save, not just for the pump, but for wealth that will last for generations. It shows how the top 1% of owners set themselves up, the changes they make to their thinking, and the way to get real, life-changing wealth. It's short, strong, and made for people who own XRP and want to level up quickly. It's in the comment below that has been pinned. Let's go back to what I learned because this is where things really get interesting. This is what it's all about. In 2014, the IRS said that cryptocurrency was property. Everything changed because of that one choice. That sounds dull, but it's not. Because once something is called property, all the laws that govern real estate, stocks, businesses, and personal assets suddenly apply to your crypto. Everything about trusts, LLCs, estate rules, liability, seizing assets, court power, and more. And while that does give us strong tools to keep ourselves safe, almost no individual buyers ever learned how to use them. On the other hand, judges know how to use their part of the law perfectly. This part really shocked me. If someone sues you, it doesn't matter what the problem is. A fight, an accident, a business matter, anything. By law, a judge can tell you to give up your secret key. They do have the power to ask for it. You can be put in contempt of court if you refuse. You might even go to jail until you follow through. I had to read the line again because it broke the rule I've lived by for years. Don't carry your keys or coins with you. According to the law, your keys can still be taken if a judge says so. Picture this fear. You get into a minor accident. Not anything important, just everyday things. But the other guy's lawyer looks through your assets, finds your XRP, and acts on it. All of a sudden, you're told to give up entry. Your whole future. Gone. Not because the deal you made was bad. It's not because you were hacked, but because you didn't set up your holdings properly. That's when I knew. Our attention has been on the wrong enemy. Wallets made of hardware do matter. Self-custody is important. But there is another battleground, one that most crypto users don't even know about. And you're open to attack if you're not ready. What I learned changed everything for me. You need to hear this if you want to know how the richest 1% keep their money safe and how XRP users can set themselves up before the craze starts. Once I knew what the danger was, I began looking for ways to stop it. And that's where the crypto as property classification went from being a threat to a huge chance. Because the rules that let a court take property also give you strong ways to protect that property if you set things up right. Think about how wealthy people take care of their homes or stock portfolios. They don't leave their own names on $1 million houses. They don't let anything get out. They put things in trusts, LLCs, forms of government, structures that keep them away from the asset, buildings that make walls instead of doors. A lot of small buyers never even think about this. We buy crypto, hide it, and hope it goes up in value. We'll figure out the rest later. As charged, guilty. I learned that treating crypto like a lottery ticket is the exact opposite of what smart money does, as I learned more about it. And the first thing I looked into was death and dying. It's not fun. It's strong. I had no idea about the step-up and base rule. This only applies to the US, but it's huge. Let's say you paid 50 cents for XRP. It costs a lot more now than it did back then. You have to pay taxes on all that extra value if you sell it. However, if you keep it until you die and then give it to your children, the tax basis changes to the present value. In other words, your family could sell right away and not have to pay anything on the money you made. That's how rich families keep their money safe and pass it on to others. This is also true for crypto because of that 2014 description. And then there's the relief from estate tax. At the moment, each person in the U.S. can leave behind about $13 million without having to pay estate taxes. For married people, double that. That number will never be reached by most people. Even so, you still need the right papers. To make sure it works the way it should, you need a trust, a will, and the right structure. That led me to trust. Claver talked about how to use a living trust that can be changed for crypto. It made perfect sense after I looked into it more. A trust keeps things secret. It stays out of probate. It stays out of court delays. It keeps your family safe. Your XRP goes to the person you choose without going through public court records, waiting months or years, or having anyone look into your accounts. But the most eye-opening change happened when I looked into how rich people handle assets that are going up in value. They don't sell them, they make use of them. They use them to borrow money. Because loans aren't money coming in, loans are not taxed. And loans let you keep your risk while still getting cash. Of course, this comes with risks. If the price drops, collateral can be sold. But this is about how you think. People who build wealth look out for the goose. They don't kill it just to get paid once. All of this made me think again about structure as well as protection. The legal structure, the business structure, and the access structure. The Wyoming LLC was the first big tool that stood out. Because Wyoming in the US has something very powerful called charging order security. If someone wins a case against you, they can't just take the assets that are in an LLC that was set up correctly. The LLC isn't required to give anything away, so the attacker could leave with nothing, and your XRP would stay where it is. That's when the light went out. We should not think like small buyers anymore. We need to begin to think like people who are getting ready to be rich. Lots of us think that XRP can do great things. If it does, hackers won't be your biggest threat. It will be legal risk, bad organization, and not enough planning. This is where things really start to get bad. Because once you know why these countries hid how weak they really were for 10 years, you can see why the unwind is now instead of 5 years ago. It wasn't because the system was stable, it was because the system had been stopped. It was put to sleep. Zero interest rates hid the fact that the government was weak in the same way that makeup hides a bruise. Before the cover-up came off, everyone looked fine. That anesthetic went away overnight when Japan finally moved. And all of a sudden, the banking system woke up. It had been built on the idea that Japanese rates would never change. And it hurts to wake up. This is the first time that banks have to admit that the assets on their balance sheet are not worth what they say they are worth. The swap lines are already under a lot of stress, the cash windows are already open, and the worst part is that they can't hide the losses. No one wants to say that these things are really linked. They weren't limited to one asset class because those positions were paid by yen. They didn't just work in one country either. They were all over the place. They spread to U.S. treasuries, tech stocks, crypto infrastructure, developing market debt, carry pairs, risk parity funds, commodities, FX forwards, swap spreads, synthetic dollar markets, and collateralized lending schemes. Everything got money from the same place, a held-back yen. As soon as the yen became less expensive, all the assets that were unfairly helped by it started to lose value. Also, re-rating is just a nice word for deleveraging. Forcing someone to sell is what deleveraging really means. You can also say forced selling to be nice. This is going to be violent. But here's the part that almost no one sees. This unwind is moving faster than anything we've seen before because it's not a panic at the customer level. It's an edge event at the institutional level. Normal people slowly freak out. Funds fear right away. They just press the button when they see the risk model turn red. That's why big changes happen in days instead of months. It's even scarier that this is just the first wave. Because this is the truth. Japan held everything together. Everyone could act like the system was safe as long as Japan stayed put. Europe could act like their bond market was in good shape. China could act like their underground banking wasn't going down. The US could say that deficits didn't come up. Emerging markets could act like their dollar debt was not a big deal. But when Japan changed, that excuse was no longer valid. In fact, you can see the recalibration happen right now. There are widening swap spreads, less cash in the dollar, foreign borrowers selling paper quietly, central banks worrying about forward guidance, and repo rates changing when they shouldn't. In a stable society, none of these things take place. These things take place in a system that just had a foundational rock pulled out from under it. And now here's the piece you definitely need to understand. When the yen carry ends, the next question is what will come in its place? What will be the new settlement base for global flows that is low in volatility and high in liquidity? As soon as state debt is no longer neutral and FX markets can't be trusted, what will be the new neutral settlement rail? We can use digital settlement to help with that, not speculative tokens, memo coins, or stories based on hype that fall apart as soon as the market calms down. We're talking about real payment rails for institutions, systems that are designed to handle cross-border funding, the movement of value in real time, and the continuation of operations when the old financial infrastructure starts to fail. Everyone in the business world has been moving toward this point for years, but most people still don't see it happening. And this is where Ripple's 10-year foundation work goes from being an interesting experiment to a necessary backbone. Ripple spent more than 10 years building the plumbing that the next financial era will need, while everyone else was focused on marketing stories, trade cycles, and getting attention. They made ways for big institutions to quickly move money through liquidity paths. A lot of different types of partners were built in, including banks, fintechs, money transfer services, payment companies, and government agencies. They made accountability tools that work with the rules that are already in place instead of going against them. They built facilities along a corridor where real money moves now, not tomorrow. They made API platforms that can be easily integrated into business systems without needing to be completely redesigned. They made settlement logic and messaging rails that are similar to what banks already use, but run on digital tracks that are faster, cheaper, and can be programmed. They even made CBDC connectors that make it easy for governments to switch from old systems to new digital designs. As a result, when the old rails stop working, payment times get longer, liquidity gets spread out, and cross-border systems break down under pressure, institutions won't be able to try new things. They'll need a system that they can use right away and that has already been tested, regulated, integrated, and scaled up. There was no build-up for Ripple. They put up buildings and roads. And when world markets finally ask for real digital settlement, it will be turned on right away by the institutions that set it up. They were sure they could by Ripple. And this is exactly the kind of setting where new lines are accepted, not when the market is calm or when the market is rising. During crises, when friction is too much, when delays cost money, when trapped capital is a threat to survival, when foreign exchange conversion slows things down, when treasury departments can't wait 2 days for settlement, and when banks need to be able to work with different currencies that are all moving at the same time, new rails are put in place. That's when an alternative settlement becomes the only choice that makes sense. Many people believe that institutions move slowly until they don't. Crises shorten timeframes. In 18 months, technologies are used that would have taken 10 years to get used to. Not having a fast, neutral, liquid settlement rail is now becoming a competitive disadvantage because we're hitting one of those windows. That brings us to the next step in this chain. The liquidity scramble is caused by the unwinding of the yen carry. The next question is, what does that liquidity scramble do to the national debt markets? Do not forget that national debt is meant to be the safest type of asset in the world. Sovereign debt stops being a risk-free asset when rates change this quickly, countries run such big deficits, and rollover risk becomes uncertain. Instead, it acts like an emerging market asset with better PR. You can see it now. 2-year rates are not going to stay the same. There are more bids and asks. Auctions seem to be under a lot of stress. Foreign involvement is slowly going down. Yield curves moving back and forth like they're hooked up to power lines. Looks like they're not sure of themselves. These are signs that something is weak. And banks get scared when national debt changes quickly. When banks are worried, they make it harder to get loans. When credit gets harder to get, liquidity goes away. When there isn't enough money to go around, institutions look for other ways to get by that don't depend on central bank tricks. The reason central banks are talking about connectivity all of a sudden is because of this. They're not doing it for fun. They're doing it because the old system is under a lot of stress in ways they won't say in public. They need to be able to settle on their own. They need to be free from FX. They need to be free across borders. They need a rail that won't break when the value of one currency goes up by 8% in one morning. Because of political changes, they need a train that doesn't freeze. They need a way to move money around without having to ask for swap lines. Finally, the next piece in this story falls. The rise of settlement paths that are neutral and don't depend on assets, not run by a single country, dependent on more than one currency, not based on the policy of a single central bank, a real fair bridge for value. And you can already see the change if you pay attention. It's not heavy, but you can feel it. The tone of central bank study papers is slowly changing. Pilot projects for interoperability between countries that don't usually work together. Bank groups are trying tokenized settlement in areas that weren't even talked about 2 years ago. Tier 1 banks are putting together working groups on digital assets, not to speculate, but to make settlements go more smoothly. This is all getting worse because of the same root cause. Not stable, because uncertainty makes people try new things, and trying new things speeds up acceptance. Now, this gets even more interesting, because the next part of the yen's fall will affect more than just stocks and foreign exchange markets. It will start to meet real-world cash flow needs, company funds, payroll across borders. The world's trade moves, shipments of goods, settlements from insurance, money transfers. In times of market stress, these flows don't stop. They get stronger, and the rails need to be able to handle changes in the weather without breaking. Normal rails were not made to work in this setting. They were made for a world that was slow and reliable before computers. The world isn't slow and steady anymore, though. There aren't enough lines to keep up with the speed of money. As soon as the gap gets too big, the rails themselves become the problem. That's why this moment is important. We know this for sure. The system is showing its flaws right now, not because of guesswork or hype. And when flaws are shown, alternatives become useful. This is not advice about money. After the cash shock, the collateral shockwave always comes. Most people aren't even looking that way by the time it hits. They are still paying attention to the news, changes in interest rates, exchange rates, and stock prices. But they have no idea that the real danger is growing below the surface of the whole system. Because when the value of collateral changes, all institutions that hold debt have to quickly revalue their balance sheets. And real-time repricing is something that the old banking system was not made to do. It was designed to be changed every 3 months. It was made for reporting once a year. It was made to move slowly and steadily. But the unwinding of the yen carry is making a system that can barely handle overnight volatility to mark-to-market. This is where the real cracks show up, because the institutions holding the collateral aren't the only ones who can change the value of the collateral. It falls down. The value of a pension fund's bonds goes down. The FX contracts that a hedge fund has bought start to lose value. It's a surprise for a bank that its swaps get bigger. The cost of short-term borrowing for a business treasury goes up, not out of fear, but because risk models say so. Every link in the chain gets tighter. When volatility goes up, banks lower their risk. When risk is lowered, liquidity goes away. And when there isn't enough money to go around, institutions sell anything they can, not just what they want to. That's where sickness comes from. Not out of fear, but because of math. Add to that trade around the world. People forget that trade around the world is a big chain of claims that are backed up by assets, as well as letters of credit and payment guarantees. There are also insurance triggers, foreign exchange hedges, and financing for accounts outstanding. The cost of these promises goes through the roof when collateral isn't safe. When the price goes through the roof, businesses either delay shipments, cancel orders, or look for other ways to get paid that are easier for everyone. Here is where digital settlement goes from being an interesting project to being a necessary part of doing business. Not in the year 2030, not for 5 years. Right now. As long as a business can escape a 3-day settlement delay when cash flow is tight, that's not innovation. To stay alive, the main point is now here. Now is the time when institutions will start to value instant settlement not as a feature, but as a way to protect themselves from danger. Counterparty movement is stopped by instant settlement. It gets rid of secondary decay. It gets rid of FX mismatch windows. It gets rid of the empty spaces where bad things can happen just because time exists. Time is your enemy when instability affects the whole system. And by definition, anything that cuts down on settlement time is important. That's the change we're making now. In the meantime, central banks are working together in secret, not in public, not too loud, but through technical working groups that looked at interoperability, liquidity corridors, and the reliability of cross-border messages. There's no one who is going to say that the settlement system is stressed. They'll say things like making cross-border operations more efficient, making it easier for money to flow, and connecting digital and traditional trains. That's code. That's what bureaucrats say when they want to solve a problem that they can't say out loud. You can see the path if you read between the lines. Independence of the settlement, independence from FX, flexibility of rail, choosing not to. That's why the next part of the unwind won't be about markets. It will be about building things. Prices drop when the market is unstable. Systems are hurt by architectural instability. And now is the time when the system is being put to the test in ways it was never meant to be put to the test. A world with many poles, a trade situation that is less globalizing. A lack of liquidity broke up the FX market. A financial core with a lot of national debt, as big as a few $100 trillion, the futures market. Because of these factors, settlement lines need to be able to work even when there is political unrest, currency instability, or coordinated sell-offs. That can't be done with normal tracks. Yes, digital lines can. The institutions that get ready early will be able to handle this situation without any problems. Institutions that wait will have to deal with a world where moving costs a lot more. And institutions that don't pay any attention to the change will be unable to get cash when they need it the most. People think that financial changes take a long time, which is the biggest misunderstanding about them. They don't. The system shows its flaws to the public for the first time during stress events when they all happen at the same time. That's where we are now. A world system that has to change because of real-world pressures, not just theory models. Even stranger, most people won't understand what's going on until the shift is already happening. It wasn't that they couldn't see the signs. It was that they were looking at the wrong ones. Prices were more important to them than lines. Their attention was not on plumbing, but on instability. They were not paying attention to the structures, but to the symptoms. But the institutions that are paying attention, those that are already testing new trains, looking into cross-border digitization, and getting ready for a future with more than one rail, those will do very well when the old system finally admits it can't keep up. It will be too late for the rest of the world to catch up. The new settlement design will already be in place. You can now get to the plan that banks don't want regular people to understand. You can get ahead of the crowd with the XRP Millionaire Plan, which explains how settlement works, how liquidity works, and when the switch to digital rails will happen. The structure that the best analysts use.